for that beautiful introduction. Greetings. How are you? Babatyehimbamtu, as I know you. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for having me. Breatheandmovement. We're all about arts education, humanity, community, enlightenment, and positivity. I'm really delighted to bring some wonderful energy to the world, to our youth, from your home, from your institute here. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm not quite sure where to start. If you want to go with the beginning or you want to
Can you introduce yourself, your name?
Okay, Tyehimba Mtu. And as you started saying about being a master drummer, master drummer is a community and concept which is more common in West Africa. This is a drummer who has a spiritual connection, meaning that you speak for and to the ancestors, and you're giving off that kind of energy and messages directly for our people. So that doesn't mean best drummer. It's not an ego trip of any sort. It's a spiritual and community connection.
Wonderful, thank you. Master Carver. So a majority, all but 4 of these drums and art sculptures you created by hand.
Yes.
Wonderful. How many drums have you created from scratch on your own?
I have no idea.
In total?
I have no idea. Because, again, these are my drums. I've made drums for people, lots of people.
Okay.
So, for example, I have a whole group of black drums, which I call the Black Drum Society. And when I used to actually teach a lot more than I do now, the people that started off pretty much all had one of these black drums.
Wonderful.
So when we all get together, it's a whole lot of drums. So that's kind of the way it started off.
Wonderful.
And I make drums for people. So it's not just the drums in the room are not all the drums I've made.
Wow, wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started into carving drums? Was this something that you had, do you think that you had this in you when you were a little boy? Did you dream about this? Did you wake up one moment and have an aha moment? Was there a teacher or someone, maybe even a family member who was into carving? Where do you think you get your talent from? The skill?
The talent and skill comes directly from ancestors. So I mean, that's a fact. Interesting, you asked me 10, 12 questions, but
yes,
just to give a little background on the whole thing. The same way when I started drumming, I actually got my first drum when I was around 5.
Okay.
But I got my first African style drum when I was age 7.
Okay.
And interesting enough, the story starts, my oldest brother was making drums at the time. He made kunga drums, kunga style drums. So he actually assembled them from 2x4s of different sorts. He turned them on a lathe, and he made the metal stuff for tightening them and everything. So that was actually my first my first handmade drum from my older brother. He was not into African culture per se, but he was an inventor and he created stuff. So that's when I got my first drum.
It runs in the family. It sounds like it's in the DNA to me.
Could be.
Wonderful.
Okay, but I've never had a drum carving instructor. So
This is just pretty much self-taught.
Ancestors taught.
Yeah, I believe
So
that.
there you go. So
I definitely believe that. Wonderful.
and of the drums that you see here, there are many, many, many different styles of drum. So there's not just one type of drum that I make. Some of the drums are similar to the drums you see in Congo. Some are similar to the drums you see in Ghana. Some of them are more like similar to the kunga drums. Similar, not the same, because there are distinct differences in the sound and the way the drums are actually made. Some are roped, some are pegged, some are laced. I mean, there are all these different styles of drums that I have here. Some are double-headed pan drums. There are many, many, many different styles of drums that I make.
Wonderful, wonderful. Out of all of these drums, which one would you say is the most unique, or out of your carvings, period, here? Any special story behind any of them?
All the drums pretty much have a character of their own, and I've never made a drum that didn't turn out. You know, it's like, that didn't work and throw it away. I've never done that. Each drum was finished and has its unique character. In terms of the uniqueness of the drums, there's so many categories. It's asking like, which of your children do you like best? You know, it's kind of hard.
Some people have their
that.
favorites now.
I know, but you don't say that out loud. I gotta sleep in this room.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay. So
okay,
I don't
definitely.
want them to be angry with me.
Definitely.
There were a lot of interesting characters in the drums themselves. For example, the first drum that I made, and I had no one instructing me on how it actually worked. Later, it became known as the thunder drum.
The thunder drum.
Okay, and it has this spiritual energy. Unlike any drum I've ever seen personally, in order for me to play it, I would wet the skin completely. And then when it got to a certain drying in the process, it was right at the site that I wanted to actually play it. And I've never seen, I don't even know where that came to me to do it, but that's the way that drum is. So whenever I play it, I wet it. That's not a normal thing for African drums, period.
I'm assuming it gives off a different sound and maybe
very,
vibration.
Very deep, extremely deep sound.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very
and it's a
interesting.
very big drum, so there you go.
Wonderful.
But that's one of the more unique drums. But a lot of the drums here are stick drums, stick and hand drums. I have drums like the one here, that's actually a Zulu style drum. This is more of a drum you'll find in East and West Africa. It's called a kakombe ngoma, and that's a drum very common to them. I mean, I have a lot of different styles of drums.
Now, do you often dream about your creations? Do they come to you in your dreams, or is this something that's just spontaneous that happened at the moment, or a variation?
I wouldn't say it was spontaneous, but the dreams, the reality is like a dream. So I mean, it's not something that I dream about and then it happens. While I'm creating it, it is actually happening. And quite often, as it progresses, I can't carve it fast enough. So that happens a lot. And that's why even right now, I have almost little to no records of not only when I carved it, even what year I carved it in. So it's not uncommon in terms of what I do to carve a drum and finish it, bring it up here. It might not go out for 5 years. So I might not even play it out.
Okay.
I'll play it here and that's it. So a lot of the carvings are like in the same manner. So that's a little different.
About how long would you say it take you to make one drum?
It really depends on the drum. I mean, the size, the type of drum. It depends on the wood that I'm carving, but it really depends on the drum. Some of the big drums obviously take longer. The first drum that I carved took me 4 months, but I didn't know how to carve at all, and I really didn't have any carving tools. So I was using regular chisels and stuff that you would just buy in the hardware store that weren't even carving tools. Now I can carve a shell of a drum in less than a day.
Wow.
And in the course of that, the process of making the drums, I like to use wood that's green or has just been cut down. Usually I cut the trees myself, carve them quickly, then I soak them in salt water for about a month.
Would you say there's a spiritual connection when you're creating these drums?
Oh, definitely.
Especially when
It's
you can
all
create
spirit.
one in one day.
It's all spirit.
Okay.
It's all spirit, and it's an obsession. It becomes an obsession.
Do you create to music?
Every time, not sometime. Every time.
Every time.
Yeah.
Do you create to music or do you like silence?
Silence.
Silence.
Yeah. But it becomes an obsession every time. So it's not unusual for me to carve 12 hours and then go to take a nap and then get up and carve again another 12 hours till I get it to a certain point.
Tell our viewers, where are you from?
Chicago.
Chicago, Illinois. Chicago finest.
Okay.
Wonderful. Would you say that people find it amazing that someone like yourself, born in Chicago versus Africa, is able to create such elaborate carvings?
Well, most people aren't aware that I do it, so their all value is very low because they don't. And for some reason, in being a priest and operating in this spiritual realm, one of the gifts that I've been given, if you want to call it a gift, is this thing of invisibility. So not only do I blend in, I just become a part of what's around it. Mm-hmm. So for some reason, people can be watching me playing 6 drums, 7 drums at one time, wow, and they don't even notice it.
Wow.
I mean, it becomes so natural. I remember once I was in St. Thomas, and I had this bright idea of like, oh, the cruise ship is coming in. I'll sell some of my CDs. I'll sell da-da-da-da-da. I didn't sell one CD, but I noticed as I was looking around, all these elders were sitting around on their lunchtime and da-da-da-da, sitting there listening, just listening to the drum.
And
none of them came over and said a word to me afterwards or before, but they were just so happy that they just sat there and were happy with, and I concluded from that clearly, that's the path that I have here. You know, it's not just about making money and impressing Europeans or even doing something just to actually get recognition of any sort. Yeah.
So would you say that the drums that you've created are a form of communication?
Always, because even that, the same with the drumming itself. A lot of the rhythms that I play are talking rhythms, and I'm talking all the time. So either the ancestors are talking through me, I'm talking to the ancestors, I'm talking to the people, but everything is about communication. There again, the whole master drummer concept. We give off energy when we play the drums, and it's an energy that's reciprocal. But at the same time, the energy comes sometime in a direct form where you're using something like language, but then it comes also in the spiritual energy that comes out regardless of what it sounds like. It's coming out in the drum itself.
Would you say that it's that the drums you play, that there's anything in particular that's being communicated or said?
Always, every time I play.
Okay.
Every time I play. You have a lot of rhythms that are directly using language, but then the other ones is a form of meditation, giving off the energy and the message that you want to put out.
Thank you. So I'm sure a lot of people are probably, viewers, be wondering, where did this come from? Can you tell us a little bit about your background? If I'm not mistaken, your background is in carpentry.
Actually, carpentry I learned. I had a sorted background, if you want to call it that. Actually, I went to school a long time, and I have a couple of degrees in philosophy. So I did all that before I became a carpenter. Before. Then I wasn't formally trained as a carpenter. I learned carpentry from not from my older brother. He wanted to build a second floor in his house. And he said, oh yeah, come by and we can do this. And you're going to have a carpenter there and you can learn from him. The other carpenter never showed up. So literally I had to learn from reading the books of how to do it and actually doing it the next day. I mean, that's how I started. But later I became a foreman, only because I could read blueprints and actually draw blueprints. So I became very good at that. But I had no formal training in carpentry. But now mostly I do rehab and finish carpentry, but I mean, I can do it all too.
What would you say to what would you say to the youth or to anyone who is aspiring to be a drum carver?
Okay, well, that's an interesting concept because I was approached last week about the same concept of why aren't you teaching people? And I'm not opposed to teaching anybody. Where are the students? So it's a matter of you wanting to do this and then wanting to actually follow through and follow through and actually make it happen. Then the standard that always comes up to is creating an eye and an ear to do it and having the discipline to actually make it happen. So that's what it really comes down to. A lot of people just don't have the aptitude for it.
Would you say that you received any opposition from people who found out that you're from Chicago versus being native to Africa?
Oh, no, not at all. As a matter of fact, so many of our brothers and sisters from the continent find the opportunity when they get here to sell stuff and sell their culture, and as if, like, you can buy this from me. And I love playing for continental Africans, as they say, because the minute that I do, they just go into a whole nother character. You must have studied in Nigeria. You must have studied in Ghana. I'm like, nope, I didn't study anywhere. And usually they just shut up. So it's a matter of they actually recognizing that there's something spiritual going on.
Definitely.
And we have the same ancestors, older ancestors, but they